I feel like before we start this episode, it needs a little bit of a disclaimer. If you have your kiddos in the car with you and you are on your way to town, I want to take a moment to tell you that this episode is about a topic that is a little bit difficult. It is a really important topic. We decided that we are not going to shy away from those tough conversations, but it's perhaps not the one that you want to have your kids in the car while you were driving to town. So maybe head out of this episode, go try one of the earlier episodes that are a little bit more kid-friendly, because this topic is a really important one. And I think it's becoming really popular in the online space. We are seeing more creators making content about how they're not showing their kids online the way that they used to. And it's becoming a little bit of a trend topic. And when I brought this up to Jess, I felt like there is probably no one in the business space, at least not that I know of, that has the same amount of background experience that Jess has through her past career. So I thought it was important to have her weigh in on this topic of internet safety with your kids, especially as us, so many of us showing our kids online. So thank you, Jess, for agreeing to talk about this today.
Welcome to the Workhorse Podcast, where we dig deep into the grit, passion, and strategy behind building a successful rural business. We're your hosts.
I'm Kendall Ballantyne, owner of Central Park Farms and Marketing for Farmers.
And I'm Jessica Garza, owner of Moose Valley Ranch and founder of Market in the Mountains.
This podcast is for hardworking female farmers and rural entrepreneurs who are ready to turn their dreams into thriving businesses. From deep diving business strategies that actually work to balancing farm family life and everything in between.
We're here to give you practical tools, candid insights, and a healthy dose of community support. If you're looking for women who actually cheer you on, are willing to tell you the hard truths, and that understand how much it can throw off your day when the cows get out, you're in the right spot.
This podcast is for the doers, the women who don't stay in one spot for too long, for the workhorses.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me that just as you were doing the introduction, kind of the settling, I won't even say it was twisting in my stomach anymore, because I think I've gotten far enough away that it's not like an anxiety inducing, but I can feel my stomach sort of start to settle in with the weight of the subject and just like everything that comes back up when I'm thinking about it. So if you don't know, because I'm aware random people on the internet or podcast land can find us, I have a background in law enforcement as a detective in internet crimes against children and child sex abuse materials. I did that for our local county here. ICAC is that's Internet Crimes Against Children. That's the acronym. Law enforcement loves their acronyms. So I did that. I was on the task force with the National Center for Missing and Endangered Children, which is a nationwide task force in the U.S. that tracks known images of child porn, and then the missing and endangered children. They're the ones that handle like the photos on the milk cartons. Do you remember those? Do you guys do those in Canada?
Yeah.
I feel like who doesn't? That was such an iconic part of our growing up, like in school. So anyways, handled a lot of really tough cases. I averaged 125 cases a year. And if you know where I live, it's a pretty small rural county. It's not the smallest county in Washington state, but we're near the bottom in terms of population. And one of the things that I heard the most, it just used to make me so mad, is, "Oh, that's your specialty? We don't have that out here."
Yeah.
That doesn't happen out here. That's only the creeps in the city. And it made me want to like run my head into a wall when someone would tell me that.
I honestly, when I first met you and found out that that was the work that you were doing, I couldn't even imagine the weight of that work. And so, yeah, when I first brought you the concept of maybe talking about this in this episode, it kind of connected because you had actually received a question through DMs that was very similar, but I understood that it was maybe a topic that you wouldn't love having to rehash. And I wasn't entirely sure if you'd want to do it. I know we did it inside a group coaching, and that I feel like that was when you were just kind of still getting through, I don't want to say the trauma of it, because I don't know if that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were still kind of getting a bit more, not uncomfortable, but it was a harder topic for you at that time, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that there will be a time it's ever an easy topic to talk about, because there's just so much attached to it in so many different ways. And then, I mean, I don't love the word trauma, and that's probably just my resistance to, I don't know, everything's labeled as trauma these days. And so I get exhausted almost with the word trauma, even as I can be smart enough to recognize that they're like, likely is trauma. It's my stubborn nature. But even just from there's always that added layer from being a person who's in a position of knowing the things that I know, the weight of that whenever I have shared on Instagram, the backlash I've received for that, the judgment I've received from other people, just kind of the way that people will talk to you when they know you're a law enforcement officer because they feel like they can, or just different things. So it's almost like you get the initial trauma of experiencing it, and then it's like afterwards it's just like it's a gift that keeps on giving for me.
I know, and I've seen it firsthand for you that, you've shared something from a lens of law enforcement and a lens of teaching and sharing and had the backlash come back to you
Mhm.
on why would you choose to share something like that on social
Mhm.
media, or, almost as if the concept was like a baiting for engagement. And it just felt so like, as a third party, to see that kind of reaction has been really hard for me because I know the heart of the reason why you would be sharing that. Nobody goes into that profession to hopefully have clickbait social media content in the future. Like, it's like,
Yeah, I can tell you, I would just rather not have had that experience to share. I think I really felt, and I still feel responsible somewhat for pulling back the curtain a little bit in it because I watched so many families struggle with the shame attached to child sex abuse, with the shame that it happened in their family. I watched moms struggle with the shame that they didn't keep their children safe, that they didn't. And I really wanted that conversation to come out in a way that took the stigma away from it, that acknowledged that it's not, disclaimer, it's not always the family's fault. It is truly the perpetrator's fault. And that no one else, knowingly walked and put their child in danger. And so, yeah, to have that sort of backlash, that really hurt. I don't have a good word for that. I mean, that really made me hesitant to talk on it for quite some time as I sort of worked my way through just how awful that interaction was. But I did, and I've shared a couple more times, and I try to be really cautious and put up the warning things now and not just like dive right into it. But it was actually my last arrest ever. So if you know or have followed my journey or anything online, I retired from policing completely. I'm no longer in that. I'm now in rural economic development. Talk about like a step
180.
one way from the other. But my very last arrest as a police officer, which was not under the Internet Crimes Against Children label. However, funny enough, it was a child endangerment case.
Yeah.
I didn't ever think of that parallel. Has gone viral on TikTok, YouTube, over a million views, I think, on YouTube now. You
Jay
cannot.
and I watched it on YouTube.
I got a picture or video of Jay at the bar, leaned over, watching my video, my body cam video, and eating. Like this, they said, this is not how I thought my Saturday
Yeah,
night
that
would
was not
go.
on my bingo card that Jay and I were gonna go out for a date night, and then I had on the drive there, I saw your Instagram story that it was going viral, so I didn't wanna, like, bug you about it or anything, so Jay was like, "Well, we could probably find it on YouTube," because Jay's a big YouTube guy, so he, like, typed in a little bit of stuff, and then we ended up watching it while having a pint and wings at the pub on date night, but it was very surprising that that would kick back up, I guess.
Well, and I will say I wasn't I had gotten a text message that I was featured, for lack of a better word, online, which is not the first time I've ever been recorded in my law enforcement career. That is something that you just accept, especially in the US. Like, we don't have a right to privacy when we are working. The public has the right to record as long as it does not obstruct an investigation or create a public safety issue. So I've been on YouTube multiple times for everything under the sun. And I kind of brushed it off and I was just like, oh, cool. Thanks for letting me know. And the person that had messaged me that just said, well, you didn't do anything wrong. Like it's not like a aha caught you kind of video. And she's like, you did great. I can't believe you had to go through that. And I was like, that's kind of a weird statement, but I just brushed it off and like kept going. Well, then apparently it hit on TikTok and people were recognizing my voice and were recognizing the car decals are visible in the body cam. And I did not want to get tagged through Moose Valley on what was work through the police department. So
Well, you also had to identify yourself in the video, like in the video when you are addressing the
yeah.
perpetrator. So like then all of a sudden your last name was also in the video.
Oh, lovely. I didn't even catch that part of it. Not surprising though. So I just didn't want to be tagged as like Jessica from Moose Valley Ranch. So I addressed it in my stories and I shared it. And I was like, well, for all of you that have ever asked if I miss law enforcement, here you go. And it was the worst 4.5 hours, 5 hours, however long it was with this female. She was out of control, intoxicated, driving child in the car. I'm just giving you the highlights right now. And the way she treated officers on scene, treated us, it was just horrible. The fact, just all of it. So anyways, I share in the video, you can hear her threatening okay, so back up. You can hear her saying that she hopes my children will die, saying that she hopes that I can't have children, saying that she's going to find my husband. And I mean, is there
Yeah,
more?
there was quite a bit of threats.
Yeah. And it was like repetitive. I mean, like fixated almost on this.
Mm-hmm.
What
Very
she was.
fixated on the concept of your kids.
Yes. I had tried at the beginning when I arrested her to like, you always try to find common ground or whatever. Like, hey, I'm a mom too. Immediately realized that was not a good tactic. Like it just inflamed the situation. So I stopped. I wasn't willing to give her any more information. And unfortunately, she drunk fixated on it. Do I regret saying anything about that? No. I mean, you try to reach through to people, and especially in the policing this day and age, if you don't attempt to de-escalate and something goes badly, like it's just, you have to look at everything through the lens of what are the jurors or public going to think when they see this on USA Today. And so I don't regret that. Some people felt very strongly that I shouldn't have said that. Like when you read through the comments, don't read through the comments. People never read through the comments.
I feel like though that is such a easy thing to say after the fact from your armchair like commenting.
Yeah.
And I think as a female in law enforcement, the chances are I mean, I don't know obviously the statistics, but I think it's pretty fair to when we see women of our age to be able to say that, assume that they may have kids. Like I think it's easy to assume that you might have kids.
Yeah. I don't know. People can armchair quarterback that situation all they want. And my words to them are then I hope you go apply for a job at your local PD so that you can do the job better than I ever did. But so I shared in my stories, I talked about it a little bit. I talked about how please don't tag me. Please don't identify me in that. I just didn't want a bunch of creeps coming over to my page that are anti-law enforcement because I really don't need that on Moose Valley. My husband is currently still in law enforcement and I just didn't want that associated. So I did address it. I did let everyone know that I was aware of the video, mostly just so people quit sending it to me. I love you all for and everyone was sending it from oh my God, was this you? Wow, I can't believe you put up with that. I got so many people that told me they would have put her in the ground. I was like, yes, well, can't really do that, even though you want to. But I got a message, and it was very much, I think, from a position of curiosity and wanting to understand, because I think that seeing that video kind of felt like an invasion of my privacy, maybe that was oh my God, I can't believe they're able to find this and put this on social media. And why would you do that? And then this person knows my kids and me and my family really well. And she had asked, don't you worry about sharing so much of the boys and having the reach that I do, that a former arrest could seek retaliation. And she touched on, she knows that we go through links to keep some different things, safety stuff does not go online, doesn't get shared in podcasts, doesn't anything. And she said she felt though if they were desperate enough that they could find a way. That's a hard question. That's a really hard question. Because when I first got it, of course, there's that filter of feeling judged. Not that that was her intention at all.
Yeah, based on who it was that sent
it. No, yeah. And 0% do I that was more the immediate reaction of oh my God, are other people thinking this too? Probably. I've been asked that a lot whenever I talk about the subject. Where do I stand on it? What do I think people should do? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? And that wasn't how her question was phrased necessarily, but it did kind of give me that pause of, crap, like I was just sharing about the DUI arrest. I wasn't trying to get into the conversation of my children's safety. And I feel like this conversation deserves another disclaimer at this point. Whatever I'm sharing is what my husband and I have decided is how we're going to handle it. That does not mean that that is how you and your family need to handle it. There are so many wildly varying factors for everyone's different situations, which I know you know, Kendall, because we've talked through.
Yeah, we've talked through lots of scenarios.
Yeah. And like I was shocked, maybe is a good word, to hear the thought processes behind you with the stepkids.
Yes. Yes. Because for those who don't know, I don't have biological kids. I have stepkids. And so I have been, though, Jagger, our youngest, he was 6 when Jay and I got together. He's now 17, turning 18. So it's like I've had him in my life for the full span of age groups, of abilities. He is now, I mean, my husband is 6'8" and, about 300 pounds. Jagger is his son. So Jagger has been grown man size for many, many years. He is quite capable in his size. He looks like a grown man and has for a long time. But I mean, Jaggy was 6 when we got together. So navigating how, as the person who started Central Park Farms, how the kids show up online. I also used to have custody of my niece and nephew. So I had 4 children in my household that had moms, that had biological moms, to which I was not that. And how do I, as the business owner and the person who is the face of Central Park Farms and the person who, mans the social media accounts, I always battled with the concept of like, do I show the kids or don't I show the kids? And if I do show the kids, as a meat producer also in Vancouver, we are in a really high population, high density area with a lot of animal rights activists. And we have had
And those people are crazy.
Oh my gosh. Like we've had in our community in the Lower Mainland, we've had people break in, like they literally bust hundreds of people, animal rights activists, to a farm in the Lower Mainland and broke into the farm. The farm had children in the barn at the time. Hundreds of animal rights activists broke in. They started live streaming from inside the barn. Police arrived, RCMP officers arrived, and RCMP officers actually negotiated, instead of just removing the people, negotiated on behalf of the activists to allow camera crews from the news into the barn before they would leave.
Yeah, full stop, no.
They were there so long that other farmers started coming with their tractors to spray liquid manure around the outside of the barns to try to get the people who were outside being activists to back away from the barns, because that's how many people were there. So like now they're in court. I don't know what the outcome of the legal end of things, but they've been in court for quite a while. So when I say like it's a problem in our community, it's not even necessarily a problem from like a direct safety. Like I've had people threaten that they were going to come and yell at my stepkids. We just live in a really difficult area to produce.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always had to take it as the lens of how do I keep these kids safe from that, as well as like just safe in general. But for me, my most likely would be safe from that scenario. And then as they got older, it was, when they get to teenage years, some of them just don't want to be on social media and some of them do, and just kind of how to navigate that piece of it to have, some of the kids online and some of the kids not online, and how that looks from the outside.
Yeah, I know you've gotten some judgment for Georgia not wanting to be online, and then it makes it look like you're somehow like
the favorite.
Yes, because Jagger loves it. Jagger hams it up. He's so cute. I love seeing him.
Kendall, I'm going to use the jackhammer. Come on, take a video.
Yeah.
Like he wants people to see the things he does on the farm. Like he would love to one day be like sponsored by Carhartt or like whatever, doing stuff on the farm. Georgia did not want that. And so it was constantly appearing from the outside, like one step kid was favored over the other, or that one was just never around and the other was. And so it was really hard to navigate. Like I'd occasionally throw out a post that would say like, hey, just as a reminder, we respect the kids' decisions on whether or not they want to show up. Just because you don't see certain kids in videos doesn't mean they're not here and they're not just off the side. doing what we're doing. But that also feels like how many times when I'm just
Mhm.
naturally showing up with my day, do I need to include a disclaimer that like, hey, one of my kids is here. She just doesn't want to be on camera. And how do we kind of like balance that and make it so that it just, yeah, it was tough. And also being really respectful to Jay's ex-wife, like the kid's mom. I'm not their mom, so I need to make sure that I'm keeping her kids safe. And I mean, I owe that to Jay, but Jay's there with me.
Right, right. He's a part of that.
Like, I have a very different and Jay's ex-wife never had an issue with the kids being online. Like, she didn't like, that was a thing that there had been a conversation about when they were young. Had she said to me, "I don't want my kids online," they never would have been online. Like,
Right.
that is not my decision to make. It's Jay and her decision to make,
Mhm.
and Jay was fine with it. But if she hadn't been, then as the person who started the business and the one who shared the stuff, I wouldn't have done that, because if anything had ever happened and I hadn't respected both of the parents, that would have been a really big thing for me. Like, I would have felt terrible. So I think I also had an extra lens of like trying to make sure that I was keeping somebody else's kids safe.
Yeah. Thank God for you for doing that, because there are a lot of parents out there that don't even think about keeping their own kids safe. So,
Yeah, and Jagger always wanted to be online. Like, it was a
yeah.
thing that we had to navigate, and it was an extra layer of, the kids getting older and them making their own decisions, but also their parents making decisions and things like that, of how we navigated that. And I mean, Jagger, one thing is I never, ever, ever tagged the kids. Like, Jagger wanted to be online, and Jagger had his own Instagram account that was like for him and his buddies as a teenager. But I never will tag Jagger in anything. Like, despite the
Yeah.
fact that his account isn't his name, and I would never tag him in it because I just didn't want anybody following me and then deciding to go follow him.
Which they do. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a very, like, look at how many women we know that the minute they tag their husband, all of a sudden people are like, ding, over.
And I mean, my mom has Instagram too because she likes to watch the stuff,
I
she
know. I
like
just
does,
saw her in my DMs this morning.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
her.
She loves like hearting your stuff.
Yes. She gives like every reaction to every story, and it makes my heart happy.
Yeah. And my mom works for the farm, and I don't tag her in any of the posts either because I just don't want her to have to navigate like whether she accepts people
Mhm.
who, try to friend, like,
Yeah.
request to follow, because that's just not, just because I have a business on the internet doesn't mean everybody in my area, like everybody who works for me. It's the same as people as with staff. My staff can
Mhm.
choose to be included or choose to not be included. I do not require our staff. Like, if somebody does not want to be on video or photos or
Yeah.
whatever, they don't have to be.
Well, and that's, I think, a really unique thing, especially about the type of businesses that we're in and the women in our circles are in, is it's very much family, community, local community. Like, there's a lot of people involved. And I think that awareness of their comfort level, that conversation. I was recording at a boutique opening, and I looked back at the video and I thought to myself, man, I know like 15 people that are in this video. And I actually decided not to share it because I'm like, those people didn't know that I was in there recording. Yes, they don't have an expectation of privacy per RCW. They were in the public space. I could have shared it, but I just kind of felt like, you know, I didn't tell. It's not like I was like, "Hey, everybody, I'm gonna record for 15 seconds," and then like stopped and did it. So I decided not to share it. I've more and more kind of leaned that direction a little bit, I think. But I do, and I think it's an important note in the conversation. I share my kids online. I share their faces online. And I find it interesting to watch in the online circles people that cover their kids' faces with emojis if they're going to share them, people that choose not to share them at all. It's kind of a fascinating topic to me to watch. And I get very interested, and I find myself going down like the detective rabbit holes
Yeah.
when I do, because I just share them. So, circling back to the text I got about former perpetrators, and this is going to be a really hard thing to hear, so we're also not going to put this soundbite online, because without the preface of the conversation and the disclaimer at the beginning, this isn't something we would ever just like throw out on a post. I'm just going to say this. If someone wants to kill you or hurt you, they are going to find a way to do it. There is nothing in this world short of billions and billions of dollars and locking yourself in a steel box with no life where you're not going to experience some sort of risk and have possibilities of someone hurting you or hurting your family. And that's a really hard truth to sit in.
I was just about to say that. That was exactly what I was going to say. That's like a hard thing to hear.
Yeah.
Now, do you, from your experience, think that it is better or worse or whatever when someone shows up? And I, again, like preface this with everybody gets to make their own decision about their kids. Everybody
100%.
gets their own, like, this is just, and I wouldn't even ask this question if it wasn't for your background specifically.
Yeah.
When somebody shows their kids with an emoji covering their faces versus just not showing them at all, which do you think is better or worse?
So here's my take on it. When you cover their faces with an emoji, you have created now a temptation of what's behind the emoji. You have created the ability for this sort of obsession to happen. And I only say that because I have seen the worst of the worst. I have looked through and read conversations and interviewed people that would make your skin crawl and heard things. And they fixate and obsess on the most odd, like things you can't. And I mean, I have goosebumps right now. Just remember it. Like it's like a Rolodex just flipping through my brain of all the things that I've never wanted to think about again. But they obsess and they freak out and they fixate on things that you would never understand. It would never be what you think it is. And I think that when you do that, especially because they're usually like the sunshine emoji or it's not just like a gentle blur where you kind of don't notice, right? Because it's like a freaking emoji. Humans are curious. We are voyeuristic at our core. That's part of why social media is so popular, is because we want to see and know what's happening in someone else's life. And when you do that, to me, it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. What's behind the emoji? What am I not showing you? I tend to think, and I suggest to women that kind of come into the circle that are, a part of the group coaching or send me a DM or something, and I have a relationship with them and they ask me about it, my opinion on it. I tell them to have a new branding shoot where the kids do not face the camera.
Yes.
Love that.
That's my opinion.
The natural photos where your child's running away from you or their head's down with a hat and they're cleaning out the stalls, or like if you're wanting them to be involved somehow, to curate photos that specifically do not have their face in it, but in a way that it
just feels natural.
It feels so natural. Like, it's just like, that's the angle we caught. That's the video we caught. It's simple things like watching when you're recording B footage that you move the camera to a space where their face isn't visible. That to me feels less antagonizing.
Yeah.
Is that a good word?
Yeah, 100%. And
no judgment. I think the women that tend to do the emojis, and I don't know every single one of them, but maybe they just have never heard this before. And in their heads, they're doing a really good job by not sharing their child's faces. And I don't want any mom to think that
they've done something wrong.
Yes, at all.
That was the reason that when I sent you a text message and was like, I know we had talked about this in group coaching and you did a really in-depth session on this in group coaching that was it was very hard, but the women in group coaching all had really positive feedback about how they needed to hear some of those things. And when I asked you to do this, I knew that it would be a challenging topic to cover. And I know that there are women who do the emojis or do that type of thing. And it's not even necessarily thinking of this end of things. They're thinking of like, my kid's too young to give consent to show up online.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And not even thinking about this end of it, of what that repercussion can be in just the attempt to honor the fact that, if your kids are young, they're not giving consent to being online. So you're going to show the family photo without showing the face and cover it with emoji, not realizing how that can be perceived in a public facing account with a following, because we don't know everybody who's following us online. And I can say that thankfully, this wasn't an issue. And so if this customer was listening to this, I would have no problem with this conversation. But I had been at one of Jagger's football games, and because now Jagger's he's a senior, right? So I I know the risk of showing my kid in his school uniform. I know that risk.
Yeah.
Like, he's like adult size, and he doesn't mind showing up, and he likes, the videos or
Yeah.
whatever. And I had shared a video of Jagger at his football game. And a little bit later at the game, I had a customer that I did not recognize because we do delivery, but one of our farm customers was like, I live in the area. And she was an elderly woman. And she's like, I always hear the kids playing football because she's like really close to the school. And she's like, I never come over because I don't know any of the kids.
Oh,
And she's like, and her husband were there. And so she came up and found Jay and I, and she's like, and then I saw your picture on Instagram and I wanted to come over to cheer for Jagger. And that was the cutest, like, absolutely adore. I was like, come over anytime and come and sit with us and watch the game and feel like you can cheer on,
your
Jagger.
community.
And Jagger came and said hello to her at the end of the game. But it was a good reminder that somebody saw the jersey, decided to come here, and it may not have been this lovely elderly couple.
Right.
It could have been somebody with like not as good intentions. That probably wouldn't happen with Jay and Jagger at the football game.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about the lens of other aged kids, it, like, in a matter of while we were still at the game, they managed to make it to the game because of that post.
Well, and I think that hits on a couple different things, like the timing of when you share things, like you said, having the jersey in the background. It also, for me, touches on the subject of if your kids are too young to consent to be online, then just don't put them online, period. Don't have video. Whatever you're doing and you're sharing, because there's a desire to share for you online, whatever that is. If you feel very strongly that your children can't consent, like if that's the stance that you feel, then don't put them online, period. Do not.
Yeah.
Don't be a mommy blogger with needing to show your kid, you know what I mean? Like, go be a kitchen organization blogger that takes the video of the containers and you know what I mean? Find an outlet that does not include them in any way, shape, or form, and don't put them online, period.
And I think there's a feeling of like, we need to show up and be authentic online, and we need to tell our story. And we hear
You don't owe anyone that.
You do not owe anybody that.
No.
And you can still portray that you were a parent without showing your kids. Like, you're not pretending you're not a mom by not showing them, but you can talk about the fact that, like, hey, for me, for example, I can be packing up pepperoni sticks and stuff like that and talking about packing school lunches without showing the kids. Like, I can still be a parent figure and still be able to do those things and be authentic to my own story of being a stepmom without showing the kids.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of what you pick. And I also think it's okay for you to change where you stand on it. I think it's okay for circumstances in your life to happen to change how you feel about it. I just am really hesitant, though, when people make these grand announcements or grand judgments about what they're doing with their children online from a position. I think they know it gets a lot of engagement when you do. And I always ask myself, and that's part of what I know you and I had a really long conversation about, the perspective of when I share about internet crimes against children and child sex abuse material. It's from a lens of educating and hoping that another child never has to sit in that forensic interview room and talk through the things that I have heard hundreds of children talk through. When someone without any of experience, background, knowledge starts to impart judgment on other women or speak from a position of authority not from curiosity, I get pretty like unenthused.
Yeah.
I'll swipe real quick and unsubscribe or unfollow, or I'm like, man, you truly, I don't think very many people have a real grasp on what's out there. And even if you are a victim yourself, which if you are, and this conversation is super hard, my heart goes out to you. Hopefully you have resources and a support system. And if you don't, like, send me a DM. I don't even care. Like, I want women to feel safe. And I know that the odds are there is going to be someone that is a victim of internet crimes against children or child sex abuse material listening to this conversation. Those people will have their own perspective and lens of this. And I will never pretend that I can walk through your shoes and make the decisions that you'll make based on your past experiences. Do whatever you need to do to feel safe. Do whatever you feel is right in that circumstance. So that's my disclaimer for it. And I don't know that a lot of people that start talking about their kids online and then make the grand announcement that they're not going to share them anymore, or that they, whatever. I don't know how many of those are or are not or have disclosed past that in the past that they're a victim. Maybe that changes things. I don't love the term victim. I'd like to call them survivors, because if they're out and functioning and raising a family and doing better, they're survivors. They truly are. But I think for me, you really have to face that reality of your own mortality as a police officer. I mean, we didn't leave the academy without a will. At 23 years old, writing my will so that if I was killed on duty, Highway Patrol would know what to do with my items. I don't know. I didn't have much, like $23 in a savings account and a truck. But
you needed to figure out what you were going to do with it.
yeah, I mean, we watch videos in the academy of officer-involved shootings. You hear there was lots of different things done through ceremonies and celebrations and awards in honor of officers who had been killed simply because a suspect decided that was the day that they were not going to go back to jail. And so you really face this idea of your own mortality, which makes it a lot easier to talk about. Mm-hmm. I think after 10 years in that, and 10 years of some close calls and some really disturbing things, you are pretty comfortable with the idea that you are going to be killed or hurt at some point. Do I love that for my kids? No. I'm a mom. I want them safe, happy, in little bubbles, but I've also watched really bad things happen to children. Really bad things happen to children that were no fault of the parent. And quite frankly, out of anyone's control other than the person that woke up that morning and decided they were going to hurt a child.
And Jess, I think one thing that I really want, that you have told me a number of times that you have not mentioned so far in this conversation, is the likelihood of an issue happening with your kids is much more likely not from somebody, a stranger on the internet.
Can you stomp twice to make that point one more time? Your child is much more likely to be hurt by someone you know. Full stop.
Which is why I think, and I know this because you've said this to me in the past before, is that you are more concerned about who the kids are with in real life than keeping them safe by showing up on the internet.
Yeah. Speaking from their physical safety, because I feel like the topic of online bullying, kids engaging in social media at a young age, that's an entirely different topic. That is something that is absolutely real. If your kid has their own Instagram account and they are under the age of 18, I would love for you to go smash their phone, honestly, because I've watched that side of it too. So you have to separate that out. We're not talking about sort of the peer-to-peer damage that happens or the mental health that comes from being online as a child in control of your own account. I'm talking about someone that physically wakes up wanting to harm your child.
Yes. And using your mom's business Instagram channel to access information about that child.
Yeah. I'm much more worried about where my kids are at physically, who has access to them physically, where are they at. That sort of conversation to me, I'll be really frank. It doesn't bother me when someone walks up in Costco and is like, "Oh my gosh, are you Moose Valley Ranch? I love watching." And my kids are standing there with me and they say hi and they know their names. It doesn't bother me. That part doesn't bother me.
That part doesn't bother me either.
No, because quite frankly, we have had ongoing conversations with our kids from the time that they were old enough to even talk about, we have safe words. We have lines in the sand we do not cross. We have expectations, because I'm well aware that we were policing in a community where the bad guy already knew my name. The bad guy already knew where I lived. The bad guy already, had a grandkid that was at the same school as my kid. There's no anonymous nature to being a small town police officer. I mean, Christ, when we were in Cut Bank, you could go to the gas station and ask where the trooper house was, because my husband and I were both troopers and we both had marked units and we didn't have a garage. They were parked on the corner. You could walk down there and ask where the trooper house was and someone would have given you directions to our front door. Multiple times throughout the years, we've had people threaten to show up at our homes. That is not uncommon. So I'm less concerned about someone that just says, "Hi, Marcus, great to see you. Loved watching you." I don't know what he's done on social media, but that doesn't bother me. I definitely struggle, though, with how much I hold in my brain and how much to share in a way that doesn't overwhelm people that are listening, or expose people to some really bad things that I just don't, quite frankly, if you never have to experience in them, if you never have to know that this is happening, I would love that for you to not have to have what's inside my brain. So it's a hard one for me because we talk through this, and as I'm talking, my brain's swirling off into lessons that like that knowledge that I want to impart on people. And I think at the end of the day, if you are thinking about your kids' safety, you are years ahead or percentages ahead of the general population. Like if you're having those thoughts and you've had that conversation with the other parent in your child's life, if you've sort of considered what the impact of being online is, if you've talked through what you're comfortable and not comfortable with, like you're already light years ahead of people that are completely oblivious to this, live streaming their locations, not caring who their kids are with in person. Like just by listening to this episode, I think is what I'm trying to say. Just by listening, just by tuning in, just by taking that, sticking with us through a disclaimer of how hard
through
this
the
is.
uncomfortable parts, right? Like it's not comfortable.
It's not. It's not. And I know that. And I know that there are likely some people, I'll be really curious to see like how many people listen to it all the way through, because sometimes it's really hard and you just need to set it down and walk away, and that's okay. So I struggle with like, what is helpful to share? What is too much? What is not enough? What do people need to know to make the best decisions for their kids? And that starts with you just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about it. Just think about where your line is, what your comfort level is. Think about how your kids' day-to-day is. How is your parenting situation? Do you have a step-parent situation? Are you bio-parent? What does the other parent think about this? How do they feel about it? What are the ages of your kids? What can they handle knowing? My kids are very comfortable with adult-level conversations around things because we've never talked to them like they are children. We never hid a lot from them because I feel like they needed to know that there's some really bad things in the world. And from my parenting perspective, yes, they're children. Yes, they're sheltered. Don't get me wrong. My children are absolutely spoiled, sheltered, given the best life they have, but they're also not unaware that there are dangerous things in the world that they need to be paying attention to. We have conversations all the time about situational awareness. Pull your head up, watch what you're doing, watch what's happening around you. And I think if you've even just reached that point, you're doing really good.
This is a huge topic and one that we want to be able to answer the questions that you have. So we will come back and do another episode on this, probably touching more so on, yes, the protection of your kids, as well as other things, because I know social media has opened me up to things like property crime and different things like that through the years. So if you have any questions on any of these topics, please send them to us. Send us a DM. Let us know, because we are going to come and circle back. Give Jess a chance to kind of decompress from all of the things that she has rattling around right now for her. Give you more takeaways of how to show up online in a way that keeps you, your kids, your family, your homes and properties safe, so that you can continue to market your business in a way that aligns with how you want to show up. Thank you for listening to this episode. We know there are only so many hours in the day, so we're honored you choose to spend some of your time with us. If you're one of the many rural women entrepreneurs who are struggling to find true community and step-by-step support that actually moves the needle in your business, join our signature group coaching program, the Workhorse Collective. You can find more information in the show notes of today's episode.
Together, we've set out to support and connect with women in rural business. If you found this episode valuable, we'd love it if you'd share with another woman in your circle. It would also be incredibly helpful if you would take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and we'll catch you next time on the Workhorse Podcast.